So Dan, you're a wizard of sacred geometry. What practical advice can you give for maybe DIY builders to incorporate sacred geometry in their homes?
Well, our essential message has always been simple. The only meaning for the term sacred here is the fact that the right shape creates an implosion of charge, which creates life and centripetal force and gravity and all the good stuff. So all the different names we have for it, whether it's Feng Shui or biogeometry, none of these words mean anything except implosive charge. Beyond that, there is no meaning. There is none. But when charge does implode, you get negative entropy in life. So differences in language are not important. The pure principle is important. And the pure principle means, first is the required material, which has to be high dielectric, so that the capacitance isn't destroyed, which means steel and aluminum is going to mess it up. It's pretty simple. And that's why living materials are essential, because of the dielectric constant. It's charge permissive distribution, and et cetera, et cetera. So the principle here is quite simple. If you use natural material, that's number one. And number two then would be a geometry that creates implosive charge. And the implosive charge, it's not complicated, it's measurable. If the frequency signature of the weak capacitive field indicates implosion, then you've succeeded. And we've proven it, because that's what makes a seed grow. So it's pretty simple.
So there are devices that can actually test for this.
Well, we started bioarchitects.net with our biologic architecture curriculum. The centerpiece for that was, there is a way to decide what architect gets a paycheck by measuring whether his building will cause a seed or a child to grow. And that's the flameinmind.com/lifeforce, as featured at bioarchitects.net and goldenmean.info/architecture. That's the point, that the weak capacitive field, the low frequency infrasound, weak capacitive harmonics of a building, the same as a tree, indicate whether it's alive or dead. Because the Schumann harmonics, which are just a name for implosion harmonics, will tell you if it's centripetal or not. That's life or death.
So Dan, in layman's terms, when I, in my, back in the days, sometimes I would wear not a cotton shirt, but I'd wear like a synthetic shirt. You actually feel ugly in it. You feel like you almost have this vomiting feeling that happens from the center of your chest, and you feel like you are squashed. Not squashed. I can't explain it. Is that a good example to just in layman's terms?
Very excellent example. It's important to connect the physics to the experience. So the reason a polyester shirt makes you feel literally sick is because your body has to implode charge, or you're going to die. If you want to live without food, for example, you have to have living charge surrounding you. And the dielectric constant of most synthetic material, polyester, for example, literally is a barrier to the implosion of charge. That's why your rubber sneakers eventually might kill you, because you're not going to be able to get access to the charge of the earth, grounding. So everything has everything to do with how a capacitor works. If you don't know how a capacitor works, you cannot know how life or architecture works.
Okay, that's very important. So so that means that's why they're having all these copper plates that you put your feet on to get that grounding energy, because we're all wearing rubber. Most of us are wearing some form of
the rubber itself, I mean, there's even natural rubbers, is not such a bad thing. The problem is if it's a very thick rubber that's isolating you more and more from access to the Schumann harmonics of the earth. So the book Earthing is very instructive. It's very correct. I always tell the famous story, I took my shoes off once in the BO co-op and my sweaty feet touched the floor. And at that instant, people in front of me and behind me decided they wanted to initiate a conversation with me. The reason was simple. When you get grounded, you get centripetal, and that is literally attractive.
Okay. So because I've moved to a flat now, because the place where we're renting next to our land is no longer available. And in this flat, I'm on the second story, and I think it's all ferro cement in the walls. These are special panels. So the ferro cement is going, because it's a block of flats, so there's, panels of ferro cement, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 50 of them left and 50 of them right. So it's possible that's also feeling that's a sick feeling, because it's like this grid is doing something to me. What could it be doing?
Well, the cement itself, the calcium, the limestone, cement itself has a wonderful capacitance for life force, even the second Goetheanum that they made of cement. What kills you, and I mean literally kills you, is the steel rebar, the metal rebar in that cement. That's why anytime you walk with bare feet on cement, generally, you immediately feel your aura just got drained. It's very simple. It's the steel in that cement that stole your capacitance. So now, but actually plastic, carbon fiber, and other kinds of rebar, bamboo meets code in many countries. So it is possible to make cement that won't kill you. A good example is my friends in Italy, Claudio and Kudai in Torino. You know, they built their new center out of cement, and they went to the local architect. And the architect said, well, we can legally make this building of everything above ground with, carbon fiber and other rebar, non-metallic, but the basement, legally, we have to put steel in it. Well, they built that building, it was gorgeous. And in the upper floors, your aura feels, you can feel it breathe, and we had lots of blisters. But in that basement, you go down there and you can immediately feel your aura goes, oh shit.
Okay. So, and I hear you. So that's good that there are alternatives.
Oh yeah, sure.
And the role of shapes, obviously you've answered that already, but like I know that we can create an interesting charge. For example, some vegetables grow really well in pyramids, so we could create a similar charge in the dome. What is your opinion on various shapes, like a pyramid, a square, and a circle, or a six-pointed hexagon and 8-pointed? Could you maybe run through some of these numbers and see what information
generally pure tetracubic geometry is the opposite of implosive. So that isn't generally going to be centripetal and therefore not alive. Generally spheres, spherical structure, Mother Nature will never use, and my friends always go nuts inside spherical structures. Bucky's spherical domes were death to life force, actually. So that's not good. And
so making a whole home like a dome and putting all rooms in the dome is a bad idea.
Well, the sphere is a bad idea. An egg shape can be very useful, but a sphere will drive you insane, I promise you. And because it's monoharmonic, basically. Harmonic inclusiveness is life. Harmonic exclusiveness is death. And a sphere is the opposite of harmonic exclusive. That's how you measure when a cell has cancer, when it turned into a sphere. Anywho,
what do you mean by, excuse me, what do you mean by monoharmonic? Single harmony.
But the frequency signature of a sphere is one frequency, and that is fatal to life, period.
Gotcha.
Okay. The other thing about geometries, that Valery Uvarov in Russia, he's making these pyramids, and then Korotkov comes in and makes a guide documentary and measures that people's aura is being destroyed. And he's filling his pyramids with steel. So all of the structures are steel rebar, and they're deathly. So it's more important to use the right material. And then after you get that right, well, then you can play with the shape. The shape is simple. The reason sacred length is called sacred is because certain lengths will divide evenly into Planck, and Planck will allow you to just, could you move those, please? Sorry about that. Apologies.
So good.
So the British foot, for example, happens to be an integer exponent of golden ratio times Planck. That's why the foot could be sacred and the meter is not. And so John Michel wrote a whole book to say why the meter is not sacred, but he missed the point. If it divides evenly in Planck and golden ratio, then it can implode, because when it implodes through Planck, accurately tuned by golden ratio, then the charge goes through the speed of light into longitudinal, which is how you create life and gravity, basically. So if you don't tune the thing by golden ratio to Planck, it ain't going to implode. And that's the only definition of sacred length, by the way, and sacred frequency.
So basically, if we have used that information that you have just provided us and design our length to width ratios, placement of windows, size of the windows, distance of the window, for example, that a window can divide a wall 1 to 1.618, then we're game. We're on it then.
Well, you know, that would be a general rule. Actually, however, the real practice is to measure the result in the capacitance. You know, it's nice to put golden ratio everywhere, but that's only an introduction to the physics. The physics is if the actual structure will musically implode. So the only real way to find out is measure it. You just measure the low frequencies of the capacitive field, you know.
So there is a device that you can recommend that's not expensive. That
I've been doing that for 5 years here. Flameinmind.com. It's you know, life force measure. It's one excellent way. We've done it all over the world. It works. You can tell what building will cause a child or a seed to grow by spectrum analyzing the weak capacitance. Exactly the same way you can measure the low frequency harmonics to determine what tree is going to live or die.
So Dan, does that mean that I can make a model of a home, 1 to 10 scale, of the same materials that the final building will be built, and theoretically testing that will be a replica of what the final building will be, considered it's placed at the right position on the land, like not putting it on a
actually,
Hartman or Curry.
The scalability is well defined here. Scalability for life force equals golden ratio exponents of Planck. So you take your building, scale it to Planck, and then if you want to make a scale model, you divide by golden ratio exponents of Planck. That's scalability defined. In fact, it's the only definition of true scale invariance because it's implosive permission. So 1 to 10, for example, wouldn't be quite so good.
Got it. So, but the question was that will the model have the same frequency as the final building?
You know, dividing by 10 is not going to be very useful. Dividing by golden ratio exponents might be useful, but there's many other issues, like
such as the placement of the home, where it's going to go,
how it's embedded. Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
so ideally, you should have a model on the same place and building it on the land.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, at bioarchitects.net, some of the best people in the world at that, you know, Aldrich in Prague is wonderful there. And Arturo is great. I mean, we have people that have been doing this for many years and they're very good at it. But it basically, you douse the site, make a magnetic map, and you need a magnetic cross point for the center point of where you're going to design your sacred space, the same way you'd site a labyrinth or a cathedral. And then you know, there's an elaborate procedure to create a basement without metal. And then you can, even low temperature fired bricks have better capacitance than high temperature. We know why. There's a lot to it.
Why? Because
low temperature fired bricks will, the fractality of the molecular array is not as melted as a high temperature fired brick. So low temperature fired brick will have more of the fractality of the ambience of where the clay came from, for example. There's a whole section of that on Aldrich's Hosman site in Prague. But basically, you know, and you wouldn't use low temperature fired brick for critical structural places, but for most brick, low temperature fired actually will, and you'll feel it. There's a huge difference in the sacred space you create.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the bricks because so the book is very exciting. Gustavino Volting 100 years ago was making 1 million bricks per year, and they're thin tile bolts in 3 layers, and he was making magic with these bricks. So I want to bring this technology back, yeah, he was building in America quite a lot. Came from Catalan. One of the Catalan architects studied in the same school as Gaudi. Yeah, basically that's the technology. 3 layered tiled bricks. The strength is phenomenal. They have I think a train going over one of these bolts, and it's very strong.
The dielectric constant of the chosen material, and 3 layers can produce a very beautiful implosive sandwich. But what would make it rich if the trace mineral, which is basically more harmonic rich, the better, the more diversity, the better. But if the trace mineral is high dielectric, you'll produce, for example, barium strontium titanate or one of these high dielectric materials will make it more implosive and therefore more magic for sacred space.
Okay, so bringing it back to natural builders, how do we check that the material that we're making clay from is high dielectric? Again, that website you recommended.
Well, measuring dielectric constant is, is 101 for electrical engineers. I can give you the formula if you like. You measure the capacitance, and then you take a formula for the thickness and the area of the capacitor, and it measures the quality of the dielectric, which is the insulator between the plates of a capacitor. And barium strontium titanate, super dielectric, key to phase conjugate mirrors, is also key to spiritual auras. Super dielectrics. That's what it's all about. Look it up.
Okay, got it. And Dan, any information on the Feng Shui? Like, how can so, because they're not talking about just materials, they're talking about placing of the home, having the window there on the east, I believe, and then and where you position the landscape. How can that all affect our homes?
Remember, Feng Shui was just an introduction to the physics. For example, placement of the looking out toward east is useful in many environments because a sailor must look into the wind to steer. However, if your house is on the side of the mountain, your plasma is coming down that mountain, and you don't always want to be looking east. So there's many other variables, but the question is, you must be facing the plasma wind if you wish to steer. That's the physics of why your bed should be facing a certain direction, usually east or north, but not always.
Okay, and what do you mean by the plasma coming down the mountain if you're next to the mountain? Is that the energetical flow of
the flow of charge, which is the wind of charge, which is the actual meaning of the term Feng Shui. So the wind of charge, if you're a sailor and you don't face the wind, you're doomed. Well, you need to steer. So on a mountainside, for example, the direction from which most of the charge is coming is not always east. Often it is, but if you're on the side of a mountain, it depends on where the mountain is, because that will be the source of your charge.
And any words on biogeometry? Because Ibrahim Karim has done some great work. I've even studied under one of his lecturers.
Ibrahim is a screen. He's right. He's made geometry that creates seed growth. It's very useful, but it would be helpful if he knew what a capacitor was. Reich had the same problem, didn't know what a capacitor was. Even Steiner, he called it etheric formative force. It's basically capacitance. So everybody inventing their own name sometimes just ain't helpful. So calling it biogeometry, we didn't need another name for a capacitor. We needed people who know what capacitors are.
Okay, so I'm going to research capacitors at the website you recommended.
I had a lovely fight with him. I said, well, he says negative green will kill you. He says, I can kill you with it, therefore I know what it is. I says, no, you might be able to shoot a gun. That doesn't mean you know how it works. He doesn't know why negative green will kill you. It's the opposite to opposite capacitance. He still doesn't know.
Okay, so I think the true master combines all the wisdom together and actually...
in one subject called physics.
Okay, yes, I use the laws of physics in designing of my home. Now you're touching on the laws of chemistry as well, so it's not just
chemistry is a branch of physics. It's all about imploding charge, actually. And the fact that Wilhelm Reich called it orgone, and James de Mayo refused to believe that it had anything to do with the capacitor well, in fact, it has nothing to do with anything else. So inventing new names every day for charge implosion is not usually helpful.
And Dan, another question: what if we create blobular organic structures that are not really domes or any? It's like a liquid frozen, and there is a way to do that with the software these days called parametric design. I'm sure you've seen some of the stuff Zaha Hadid is doing, and I'm not talking about on that grand insane scale. I'm talking about really a small home for family.
The physics is called structural stability and morphogenesis, that membrane health is always determined by harmonic inclusiveness. So actually, if you take the frequency signature of any membrane geometry and check the musical cascade generated, you can see whether it's alive or dead. So structural stability and morphogenesis, Rene Thom, laws of form, that was an introduction to how a membrane shape creates life or death. And if you have some clue of what that means electrically, then you can start to think about what amorphous shapes could do. Or you could measure the resulting capacitance. Then you'd know if you created life or death.
So a good example would be a well-designed church by the ancient architect placed on that magnetic crossing, like you stated. You'd walk into that church, especially like old Russian churches, and I'm sure you have in France some examples. You feel really, really good. You just feel well in them. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, that's
You can't
advanced.
explain it.
That's advanced geobiology, but actually you need to explain it desperately. And you know, when we found out that the cheapest way for a farmer to sue the power company to prove that their power pole destroyed his farm by measuring soil compaction, which is proof the death of the soil microbes, you can sue and force that power line to be removed from your farm because it's a cheap measurement to make. Well, all of that physics works just great to sue the Catholic Church to remove the sharp steeple. Ain't it great?
The sharp steeple.
Yeah, it has the same physics of bleeding capacitance, where the onion-shaped steeple.
Okay. Okay. Yes, the onion shapes are coming.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Russian.
Yes, yes, yes. The zones. You're talking about the zones.
Well, the Russian churches, the top is shaped like a dome, and that's more implosive. Now, there's certain situations where a sharp point might be helpful, but only if it feeds that bleeding capacitance into an array. So actually, in general, a sharp steeple is a geopathic structure. Hello, Catholic Church.
I think what Dan is trying to say is research the subject before you start sticking things onto your homes.
Well, you know, a needle is used in acupuncture where you specifically must bleed charge. But in general, a sharp steeple, hint Catholic Church, will cause the soil to die.
So Dan, have you been recently to a structure that has that implosive charge that you know, how can that benefit us besides just the health? Could a person be more inspired, more connected to universe? How does one feel inside this?
Well, you know, when Korotkov followed the Kogi to where they make ancestor phone calls and measure the fractality of the air, that was an introduction to the only definition of sacred space. And that's advanced geobiology, and that can be designed in most buildings that really work are woven like embedded tapestry into the Hartman-Curry pay-ray lines and the grid. And that embeddability produces a building that's charge dense and implosive, and literally part of the geomagnetic plasma array of the locale. And that truly will feel like a dreaming track songline. So
on your website, do you have like a list of guides of one should follow, like for creating this type of bioarchitecture? I know you've mentioned all of this, but like a pointer down, check this, number one, check that, number two, like a list of all things need to be.
There's a fairly good sequence like that at goldenmean.info/architecture, and a related set of suggestions and experts at goldenmean.info/geobiology. You know, this is an advanced field. Our friend Stefan Cardinal might be the most advanced in the world on that. And now his partner, famous here in France, Jan Lipnik. And that's all at goldenmean.info/geobiology. But these people are advanced enough that they don't need to douse Hartman-Curry pay-ray lines. They can see them clairvoyantly. And they've documented the frequency signature of those lines. For example, why a gold pay-ray line, most deflected by gold, will often save a beehive.
What information, or what can you share about William Reich's work and those Cloudbusters and those copper tubes on organic and inorganic matter placed together? Could it be used successfully within our homes? I used to draw Cloudbusters as coming out of the homes, but maybe I was just going a bit too far with inspiration.
Well, columnating capacitance can make a centripetal field, which is the cause of why water vapor would form a droplet. That's called Christos, actually. And so, of course, alternating high and low dielectrics in a concavity, which Reich called orgone, which is the wrong word. It should be called implosive capacitance, will create life force. and under the right circumstances can create rain. I would call these orgone accumulators now these love bomb cloudbusters. People, they use just a resin with aluminum foil in them. They will fractionate capacitance, so they'll break up some geopathic, but they will never assemble any life force.
Because of the materials that are used.
In other words, these orgone devices, it's just a clear resin, and you see all these metal flakes in them.
Yeah.
Okay, now those devices can somewhat break up a geopathic zone, but they will never ever help you assemble something useful electrically.
So we want to have our bioarchitecture assemble something.
Well, that's right. Well, and the orgone concept was useful. That was true. They used organic and inorganic layering. The correct term for that is alternate high and low dielectric. That would be the term a physicist would use, but Reich didn't know what a capacitor was. So, and that's why he invented his own language, eventually put him in a corner and no one could communicate. And that's actually a lesson for the biogeometry people, the orgone people. After a while, inventing your own language don't help. You got to use a common language, and that's called physics.
Yes, I hear you loud and clear, Dan. So then any comments on Victor Schauberger? Because also great inspiration came from him, and a lot of interesting devices. And even I'm using some of his methods in the designing of our bioarchitecture. What can you share with us from what you feel about Victor Schauberger and his knowledge?
Schauberger was fabulously intuitive. He was excellent, and he did so many magic, wonderful things. We just had fun with Joran Schauberger, I think his grandson, up at the Amsterdam conference. And he had it absolutely right. He knew how to make a water vortex, make a spark. The key was that water vortex was piezoelectric. And actually, what that implosion does, at the moment it spontaneously starts getting colder, it not only generates voltage from gravity. It was such a good generator, Hitler wrote a check, but it will make gravity. And the physics of why is the same for the power source and the gravity source, is because when the charge implodes, accurately tuned through the speed of light, embedded by conjugation, accurately at the Planck threshold, it spits out the longitudinal EMF coherence, which is the name for what is a gravity wave, and the only way to make life force, and the only way to make anything centripetal.
So, wow, that was incredible. And the question I have, some knowledge of Victor Schauberger has been lost through his sketches, some of his sketches, and not everything is transferred into the books. Is there anything that you say that you could recommend that's possibly missing, or where some inventors can dig towards?
Well, Schauberger contributed to the technology that became the Mercury vortex and Nazi bell. In both cases, the vortex was making not just power, but gravity, because of tuned charge implosion, producing a longitudinal plasma projection. So that is the physics. You tune by golden ratio exponents of Planck, and that vortex, in Schauberger's case, it was piezo. In the Mercury case, it's a iron powder doped red mercury. And in both cases—
What do you mean by piezo? Sorry, I don't know what that means.
The water vortex will never make power from gravity or make life force unless it's piezo. So in the biodynamic, they use a rock powder, a piezo rock powder like quartz based, and Schauberger had to do the same thing. It's the same physics of biodynamics, dynamization. So making that water piezoelectric, is the only reason that water vortex will become charge implosive and therefore alive. And that, by the way, is the key to theimploder.com as well.
Yes, yes. And what happens if we layer a few of these key methodologies to create a temple home that we feel like at least maybe a space within a home that, what can we expect by layering a few of these methodologies, getting the right materials, getting the right positioning on the earth, maybe having a water spiral of Schauberger, creating a charge? What if you layer a few of this? Will they amplify the strength of the charge?
That's what the famous book Temple in Man, Robert Lawler, it was about, that the archetypal design of temple is a capacitor that actually is a living plasma body. One little story, my partner who introduced me to Bucky Fuller, Gus Ciccacci, he built his house in the geometry of one rung of the ladder of DNA. Pent, hex, golden ratio, rectangle, pent, hex. It's one ladder rung of DNA. And in that house shaped like one rung of the ladder of DNA, in the pent, there were no secrets possible. In the hex, privacy was possible. You see the difference?
Okay. Okay. So basically what you're saying is it's also choosing the right shape for our rooms. A room for creativity, a room for the office work, a room for a bedroom. Maybe a half a sphere would be good for something, but definitely maybe not good for like a working space. I don't know. What could you recommend?
Well, it starts very simply. Tetracubic hex powers of 2 shapes tend to create charge stasis, which is perfect where you need to be like a snowflake and where you want to create separateness of charge. Secrets, for example, where the pent is the opposite, is pure implosion, and secrets are physically not possible. So that's where you wanted to have your perfectly shareable wave. So you know what part of your house wants to be pent and what parts wants to be hex. That's in the beginning. And that's the difference between tetracubic versus. So that gives you a clue. You can begin to think about shape in terms of what the actual physics is.
So a working space, what would you recommend for a good shape for that?
Well, you know, egg shape is good for most anything. If your work has to do with something very shareable and getting it out there and making a shareable wave and promotion and distribution, well, then pent is very good. If your work has to do with quietness, stability, secrets, privacy, things like that, then a hex is. It's exactly what a witch did with hexes versus pents.
Okay, wow, thank you. Thank you for that, Dan. And do you have any courses coming up that you want to share with the folk that's going to watch this?
We're in the process of reinventing fractalu.com. There's a whole new series, Tufan and myself, and so we're cooking up a new series on that. It's and Patrick, because of our biofeedback community. So we hope to relaunch that series. In the meantime, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dan Winter Fractal Field, is now approaching 300 films and 2 million views. And that it's really cooking there. We have a lot of material.
Okay, awesome. And from our side, we'll be using what Dan Winter shared with us, and we basically have a drawing course right now that I've put together that teaches folk how to draw your own home that you can build yourself and afford to build. Because a lot of homes are very expensive and out of pocket, out of budget for most folk out there. So we teach how to design a home using natural materials, using methodologies that we spoke of today. And please join us, www.bioveda.co/3D.
BioVeda, is it
BioVeda, just one word, BIOVEDA.co.
Yes.
/3D.
3D. And I want to say that, my mother was an artist, and I've always admired those who can actually draw the organic. I did a lot of sacred geometry modeling by equation, but actually that talent to draw. And I would even set a challenge there that if you can lucid dream what you have or are about to draw, we now know the physics of what causes a lucid dream to become lucid. The actual creation of the drawing, if it's a climax of a lucid dream, we've actually measured how lucid dreaming becomes stargates and real. So literally how dreams become real, which is what drawing introduces you to, is the same as the physics of lucid dreaming, which is basically when your aura gets centripetal. You measure the brain waves, there's lots of ways to measure it, do it with the breath. But so centripetal aura indicates when your lucid dreams become portals, literally when your dreams become real. And that's what sets the charge imploding through the vehicle of your drawing.
And talking about portals, could we create a portal by getting some of the methodology that we spoke of right?
Well, that's what we showed. For example, Therify.net repeatedly triggers lucid dreaming, and we know exactly why, because it makes the aura more centripetal. And that gives inertia to what is passing through Planck out into a longitudinal array called the dreaming track song line. And so your ability to embed in that larger array depends on the emission of longitudinal coherence out the center of the body, which is where it became dense and imploded. And that inhabiting that array is the physics of lucid dreaming. And obviously the difference between a lucid dream trigger and a portal is simply the amount of charge density. And we've actually proved that now. Our latest film with Jean-Charles Moyen, who repeatedly, his lucid dreams get so lucid, he comes back with sand between his toes. And now we know why, and we've measured it.
Wow.
Our latest film just went viral. Check out our YouTube channel.
Okay, what is it called? Not the channel I got, but the film.
Yeah, well, it's the second last film at Dan Winter Fractal Field YouTube channel, which is Jean-Charles Moyen, the French secret space program survivor, who's quite famous. He's a filmmaker. And what he's famous for is the fact that many, many have witnessed his lucid dreams became so real that he came back with material, sand and water. When he came back from his dreams, witnesses saw that he brought back material from where he went many times. And the physics of how that happens is the brainwave and breath become so implosive coherent, the centripetal force in the aura goes over the threshold from a lucid dream into a Stargate portal. And we've explained the physics and measured it.
So could we get some of that into the home temples that were built? Do you believe that?
Use the same frequency signature, flameinmind.com. Pure implosion.